She answered a knock at 2:14 a.m. When the police arrived, they couldn't believe their eyes. It was 2:14 a.m. when the knock on the door woke her up. Her eyes opened wide with fear as she listened to another loud bang. Who could be out walking around at this ungodly hour? Moreover, why were they banging on her door? She sat up in bed trying to make sense of what she had just heard. Maybe it was just some kids playing around, or maybe someone looking for a friend's house by mistake. Still shaken from the sudden commotion, she got out of bed and walked over to the window to see if she could spot who was out there. The streetlights flickered, casting eerie shadows that made it hard to see anything clearly. But as she strained her eyes, she thought she saw something. Someone was standing right outside her front door. The streetlight flickered again and she gasped. It wasn't someone, it was a pair of glowing eyes. She couldn't help but shiver. Whatever was out there didn't belong on the streets at night, and certainly not at 2:14 in the morning. She pulled back from the window, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she heard it again, the sound of heavy footsteps coming closer. What should she do? Her mind raced, trying to come up with a solution. Should she hide under her bed, turn off all the lights and hope for the best? Or should she call the police? Just as she was about to make up her mind, the knocking came again, louder this time, and a voice boomed through the darkness. "Open up. We know you're in there." Startled, she stumbled backwards, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The voice outside continued, "We just need a little chat. Please open the door." It was clear they weren't going to stop. So she knew she had to do something. With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and dialed 911, her voice shaking as she explained the situation to the operator. "I don't know what they want, but they've been banging on my door for a while now," she whispered, her eyes darting towards the front door every few seconds. "I think I heard them say they wanted to talk to me, but I don't know what they're after." As the minutes ticked by, her fear only grew. She could hear the voices outside getting louder and more agitated. "Come on, man, I'm sure she's home," one of them said. "Yeah, let's get this over with," replied another. Suddenly, a crash from downstairs made her jump. One of them had kicked the door open. Adrenaline surged through her veins. She had to do something, anything to protect herself. She ran into the bathroom and locked herself inside. As she waited for the inevitable, she tried to calm down her racing heartbeat. She splashed water on her face and told herself everything would be all right. The police were on their way, and they would be there soon. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. But then she heard footsteps approaching the bathroom. Her heart pounded in her chest as she listened intently. She could hear them getting closer and closer until they stopped right outside the bathroom door. "Hey, there you are," a voice called out. "We know you're in here." Just as she was about to respond, she heard sirens in the distance. The voice outside the bathroom door suddenly changed. "Shit, the cops are here. Let's get out of here." Footsteps ran away from the bathroom. She heard the door burst open, and then heavy footsteps running down the hallway. She could hear the commotion in the living room as the men ran away. She also heard the police enter the house. Moments later, a police officer knocked on the bathroom door and called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She quickly unlocked the door and stepped out. The officer rushed to her side, his face etched with concern. "Are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" She shook her head, still shaken but unharmed. I'm fine," she stammered. The officer nodded, his gaze sweeping the room to make sure she was alone. "Stay in the bathroom until I tell you it's safe, ma'am," he instructed before leaving the room. She nodded, relief washing over her as the officer left. She leaned against the door, her legs weak and knees wobbly. She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. When the officer returned, he offered her a reassuring smile. "You're safe now," he said gently, extending a hand to help her out of the bathroom. She took his hand, feeling a surge of gratitude for the officers who had come to her rescue. The officer led her into the living room, where 2 more officers were searching the area. "Can you tell us what happened, ma'am?" one of the officers asked, turning to face her with a kind expression. She took a deep breath, trying to piece together the events of the evening. "I heard a knock at the door, and when I went to check, I saw these glowing eyes outside," she began, her voice still shaking. "They started banging on the door and I called you." As she recounted the terrifying ordeal, the officers nodded, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. The more she spoke, the more coherent the story became. The officers listened attentively, their expressions growing grimmer with each detail. "Did you recognize the voices, ma'am?" the lead officer asked, his gaze fixed on the floor as he searched for clues. She shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. No, I'm sorry. I couldn't make out what they were saying. The officer sighed, knowing that this new piece of information would make the case more challenging. He turned to his partner, exchanging a look that spoke volumes. They both knew how dangerous this situation could be, but they were determined to find answers. The officer cleared his throat and addressed her once again. Do you know anyone who might have wanted to harm you, ma'am? Any enemies or recent arguments? She pondered the question for a moment, racking her brain for any possible answer. No, not that I can think of, she finally replied, her voice barely a whisper. I haven't had any arguments recently, and I don't think anyone would want to hurt me. The officers nodded, accepting her response, though they couldn't help but remain skeptical. With the lack of leads, the officers knew they had to expand their search. The lead officer turned to his partner, giving a concise nod. His partner understood and swiftly moved to the kitchen to gather some items. The officer then approached her with a reassuring smile. Don't worry, ma'am. We'll catch whoever did this, he said, his voice filled with confidence. He handed her a small card. Here's my card. If you remember anything else, please contact me directly, he said, his gaze unwavering. And ma'am, he added, noticing her shaken state, if you feel uncomfortable staying here alone, you're welcome to stay at a hotel. The department will cover the cost. She nodded, clutching the card in her hand. She knew she couldn't stay in the house alone, but she didn't want to leave without the police. As the minutes passed, her anxiety began to subside, replaced by a burning desire for justice. The officers collected various pieces of evidence, taking samples of the dirt from the footprints and dusting for fingerprints. The entire ordeal had left her traumatized, but she knew she couldn't let it defeat her. With newfound determination, she decided to take control of the situation. She contacted her friends and family, keeping them informed and seeking their support. As the investigation progressed, the police faced a series of dead ends. The lack of leads and the absence of witnesses made it difficult to identify the culprits. However, the determined officers refused to give up. They meticulously examined every piece of evidence, hoping to find a breakthrough. Meanwhile, she took matters into her own hands. She installed a state-of-the-art security system, complete with surveillance cameras and motion sensors. She wanted to feel safe and secure in her own home once again. Weeks turned into months, yet there was still no sign of the culprits. The case went from being a top priority for the police department to a cold case. She felt let down, believing that justice would never be served. Then, unexpectedly, a new lead surfaced. A witness who had remained silent came forward with crucial information. With renewed vigor, the police followed up on the lead, and it paid off. They were able to gather enough evidence to identify the suspects. It turned out that the break-in was not a random act of violence, but a targeted attack fueled by jealousy and revenge. One of the suspects had been obsessed with her, and when he learned that she had ended their relationship, he sought to punish her. The arrest of the suspects brought a sense of closure and justice. While the traumatic event had shaken her to her core, she had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. Experience had taught her the importance of self-defense and the power of resilience. Now, whenever she feels fear or anxiety, she channels it into action, whether it's practicing self-defense techniques, installing state-of-the-art security systems, or simply spending more time with loved ones. She refuses to let the trauma define her. Instead, she has turned it into a catalyst for growth, ensuring that no one can break her spirit.